It's a real privilege to get to finally be in conversation with you in public, Farah. Yeah, I'm just still reeling from that beautiful music and that scene of liberation and connection to water at the end there. Yeah, I guess like something that we definitely did want to start our conversation with today, and especially in the context of this beautiful exhibition, congratulations, Julia, that you've put together, is just thinking about this question of solidarities and the need for spaces like this and a need for an exhibition like this at a time like now. And, you know, when grief is so policed, it's really important to have these spaces. Did you want to say anything else on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for being here and to reiterate that it is extremely heartening to be welcomed into a space like this when so many of us are experiencing, you know, really frightening levels of silencing by many institutions around the Western world. So I really want to thank KADIST for hosting us, and I also just want to say personally that it's been a really incredible thing to find solidarity with other like-minded people, and so I just want to thank you all for being here today, and
Thank you. And this is a beautiful work by you from 2016. Mm-hmm. What's it called?
It's called S Eating Watermelon. This is a really good friend of mine who is very scarily eating a melon and is not worried. The confidence in her knife work. She's an amazing artist. So some of the people that I photograph prefer to remain anonymous. So sometimes they're initialed in titles of artworks, and sometimes they're not.
Yeah. But so tonight we're going to have a chat, and it's going to be very loose, and we have so many images and videos to hopefully select from here. Yeah, and afterwards we'll have some time to discuss together, and we'll be showing things, and please do join us in a conversation. But maybe we could start first to go back to the film, the beautiful film we just saw. And I first saw that in Sharjah in an installation, in a 2-channel installation. It's really actually you did so good, make it a single channel.
Thank you.
Yeah, but where I saw it was in a former courthouse in a former jail in a part of Sharjah called Khurfakan, which is by these really mystical mountains really close to Amman, where there for sure are ghosts and jinn in that area. And just by the water. And I think there's like something about being in that water and being in that gulf and thinking about these systems and structures that were inherited, like the courthouse, from our colonizers. And watching this film in that space was really powerful for me. And I just wanted to summon back the context of convening civic poets, which is really thinking about the different layers and histories and confluences of solidarities, of resistance and struggle, a lot of it centering around Palestine, which is on everybody's mind right now. But I wanted to kind of begin speaking about this research that you've been doing, and that isn't hardly present actually in contemporary visual arts, but in visual culture in general, actually to speak about the Gulf from the perspective, or to reveal this history. And that's like a shared struggle we have across the region in the ways that the British have, created these borders, which not only have oppressed people and practices, but also created huge separations and created a distance to nature and to water.
Yeah.
So I'd just love to hear you speak a little bit about how you came to do this research and this story.
Yeah. I think first of all, the most important thing to mention is that the concept of the jinni or the demon is really a container for me to talk about all of these other things, to kind of access them through these narrative fictions and oral histories that don't really have a place in our official kind of, state narrative of how the country was formed and what traditions we preserve and what we leave behind. So I am morbidly interested in jinnis and hauntings and everything of that sort, but I think it's really just a kind of device to look at a place from a kind of, characterless place. So I grew up, my father's from Ras Al Khaimah, which is where this is set, and my mother is Lebanese American, but I grew up in Abu Dhabi, and so I really feel like I kind of benefit from this outsider perspective, where I've kind of seen things change and grow, and felt a real sense of loss, but also felt like I feel as I get older and as I live farther away from the Emirates, I feel a deeper connection to the actual place. And so for those of you who don't know, the country is only 50 years old. It was a British protectorate from the time that this film is set, or parts of this film are set, until 1971. Ras Al Khaimah were the last emirate to join the Union because we were very much, because they were, I was not alive in 1972, but they were very much opposed to this idea of a country mandated by British lawmakers and military officers who clearly had economic interests at heart. They weren't looking at the geography and saying, what would be good? They were looking at tribal connection. They were looking at how to leverage certain animosities, and they were looking at where the oil was. And so this is also what we see literally happening right now in Palestine. So anytime you see a British pencil mark on a map, there's going to be something really awful behind it. So, anyway, I grew up, our house is right by the ocean in Ras Al Khaimah, so the end of the film where Majid is in the water, he's surrounded by mangrove plants that my father planted in the late 80s that are really incredible because they sustain so much life. They feed flamingos, they feed turtles, they feed storks, and just 20 minutes away from us, you can see cranes pop up on the skyline. And so for me, the water is a site where you really see all of these different opposing and tense energies play out. So the jinn, water, the history of piracy, which is not very well, Sheikh Sultan Al Qasimi, who is Hud Al Qasimi's father, wrote an amazing book on it, and the text that Sir Henry reads is pulled from historic letters written by the British Royal Navy and East India Company to the king. So it's a really rich history that hasn't really been formalized or hasn't really been told in a kind of narrative way. So it felt like the right way to kind of coalesce all these strings into one kind of funny, like Frankenstein moving image.
But there are so many layers though, so I grew up in Bahrain, I'm half Bahraini, so we share this kind of like being half Khaliji and growing up there. And Bahrain has a very different history in relation to the British, because they made friends with them. they colonized the island like in the late 19th century, actually. And that, they discovered oil in Bahrain in 1930, and now we don't have any. Right. We have to beg from Saudi. But yeah, basically that history is interestingly different, and it's quite interesting to see like the different ways that it manifests. But there were so many images that like we see, and it's just these layers of ongoing colonization and ongoing erasure actually of the resistance that exists. And I think that there's something very important to say about narrative and story, which is why I think this is such a powerful work in terms of thinking about the memory of resistance to colonization. And I think there's been a total projection on the Gulf of, just that oil sheikh glam situation. But there was a moment in the 70s where there was the possibility of a leftist rebellion, like actually the resistance to the British at the time of colonization was a labor resistance. It was related to the fact that native people to the land were actually the labor that were extracting the oil. And there was a huge movement at the time of communists and leftists and Baathists, before it turned crazy Baathist in other countries, where they were like thinking of actually finding ways to share ownership of these resources. And that was a huge part of the resistance to the colonizers, which is hardly told, which is why I feel like a lot of these images aren't there. And instead you have this ongoing colonization through, you know, you played that crazy expat song.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's that man's name is Patrick O'Brady, and he was my brother's guitar teacher. He was an expat from Ireland, and this song was on the radio all the time because a lot of our radio stations are British, and we had British clubs. And
I went to British school. I went to St. Chris.
Yeah. It was like either you went to the British school, the international school, or the American school. Or, you know, the Emirati public school. But actually, this is a funny image to land on, because to that point, you asked about research. And I think, you know, research is such a loose term because there's looking at books, there's looking at documents. But when you're kind of dealing with a place where not very many things are written down, you have to rely on oral histories, which means that there's a lot of kind of, the truth is very slippery, you know, and you kind of have to treat it that way. So I heard this amazing story about my grandfather this morning on WhatsApp. I knew it like loosely, but I asked my father to clarify it while I was on the train here. This is my grandfather in this photograph, and he was one of the leaders of Ras Al Khaimah in the 40s, I believe, 40s and 50s. I never met him, but this is a photograph that I made called Still Life for Baba, I believe, something like that. But my dad is like a Sunday painter. He loves to paint like delets, like teapots and pomegranates and things like that. So I set up this still life for him to paint of his father with all of these other kind of, you know, objects. But apparently, because the resistance to British imperialism and protectoratism, I don't even know what the word is, but apparently the opposition was so strong by my grandfather, and he was influencing so many other people, that the British troops that were there tried to deport him to Bahrain. And they invited him to a meeting, a friendly meeting, but then when he got there, they stripped him of his rifle, which at the time everybody carried a rifle. It was just normal. But this is all, I'm repeating to you what my dad recorded to me on WhatsApp this morning. He hid a pistol under his kandura, walked into the meeting room, and then they all were like, "We're sending you away," basically brought out the 7 guards, and he whipped out his pistol. I'm sure it was like a lot less dramatic. Also, the first time I heard it was a knife. And pointed it and basically like did one of those like those, you know, whatever Tom Cruise good cop movies, like where they back away slowly, and he's like, "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want my freedom." And he backed away, and he got far away enough. They were like, don't shoot, Sultan, please." And he got far away enough that he was able to kind of hide at his brother's house. And then I don't know what happened after that. But it's like the fact that this is my grandfather, and you know, I'm so removed from this extremely dramatic story. But I'm interested in that, and that's why fiction is so fun for me. And you know, and these kind of outlandish characters who you can probably tell they're amazing. None of them are actors. They're all artists, or they work in the arts. But I like that slippage of like, are we watching something real? Like, is this like a serious short film, or you know, why is there this weird like cutscene? So for me, that format echoes some of the gaps and some of the creative liberties that oral histories just have to take.
And I was just gonna talk about this. I mean, a lot of the way I encountered your work is often through photography, or these very layered kind of photographic installations. But Dhabaab is part of a series of films, moving image works that you're making. And I just wanted to maybe like call in like Manar and like this beginning of using narrative fiction in your work, and how did you come to do that?
Nar is film is actually the first real moving image piece that I made, and I have to say, like, I'm really new to this. I have a lot to learn about the technicalities of filmmaking, and I really work as a photographer. Amal Dhabaab was amazing because it was the first time I ever had a budget of more than $0 to make anything. And so I was able to hire an amazing cinematographer named Ibrahim Al Qasim, and to pay all of my collaborators. So Nar was really a very it was a one-man operation in a lot of ways, but then it was also really a community effort in terms of the people that I interviewed and just all of the people whose input made it possible. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to make a film about exorcisms or zars, which are common in parts of the Gulf, all parts of the world, but specifically, I was interested in the Gulf tradition of it because it had been recently outlawed by the UAE government, amongst other kind of traditional or tribal practices. As the country starts to chisel away at this idea of the state fantasy and how our kind of public image should exist in the world, there are things that just get left behind, that get, that become like forbidden. Mm-hmm. And so exorcisms were one of those things, and ma'alaya, which is essentially like drag dancing, was another thing. So I wanted to look at why, so I wanted to make a film about it. No one would speak to me because everybody was so afraid. So I thought, well, I can't make a documentary because how am I going to make a documentary with nobody in it? And so I actually met this exorcist named Ahmed. I'll pull up one of the videos I have of him. And he was amazing. He was so generous with his time. He spoke to me for 3 hours, but he wouldn't let me film his face. So with all of the information that I collected, I just kind of had this light bulb where I was like, why don't I make it a fake documentary and actually do it from the point of view of the jinni rather than the exorcists? Mm-hmm. And she can be like, telling it her way, because nobody ever hears the jinn's perspective. I have somewhere we put together a list of things to show. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Perfect.
I'm just doing it all ad hoc on my laptop. So this is. There we go. So that's just a clip of Ahmed explaining to me like certain rhythms, certain drumming rhythms that you can use to call the jinn. But this footage like sucks. You can't make a whole film out of this. Maybe somebody can, but not me. So that was an interesting challenge to me, to think about, just what can I do with what I have.
Yeah, I was like thinking about. There's two ways we can talk about this now, because I really want to talk about the music and this rhythm that you've just brought in.
Should we let the crowd vote?
Yeah, there's the music and the rhythm, and there's haunting and presence in your work. But yeah, maybe we can do the haunting and presence before we go in, because I feel like this is something, like there's the thinking through the jinn, and there's the Amal Dhabaab is you.
Yeah, Amal Dhabaab, spoiler, is me.
That kind of like narrator, kind of holding the narrative there, and then you've got Nar appears as this jinn also speaking.
Yeah, she's also me.
Who's also you, and you made the costumes for all.
Yeah,
Very amazing.
They're not that good, thank you.
But yeah, I was just thinking about this idea of jinn, and I mean, what I really related to that. I've had an exorcism, like loads of us have. Like instead of therapy in the Gulf, you usually are prescribed an exorcism, for example, for depression, teenage, adolescent, hell, like you're possessed. But yeah, I really related to the two girls, like that kind of like, I'm bored, let's call in a jinni, like that. It's like a total pastime. But I wanted to kind of talk through a little bit about this idea of the jinn character, and I know you've spoken about the ghost earlier as a kind of container, but I think I want to, the idea of haunting is in your work a lot, and it appears across like from before these kind of directly jinn related projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my photographic work has always aimed to photograph the unphotographable, which is a really kind of stupid and lofty way of saying, like, where do you locate the energy in an image? And often I think, when we look at the history of photography, a lot of the kind of memorable photography is portraiture. We think of people like Walker Evans or August Sander, of course, German and American, or which isn't to say that there aren't many incredible non-Western photographers in our lexicon, but that's kind of what has remained as canon. That's being taught in universities around the world to this day. So I have always wanted to photograph my friends in my community, but then they have always preferred to remain anonymous. So I had this question of, how do I honor that anonymity while also making work that is about them, that is for them, that is, of some aspect of them. And so for me, this aspect of haunting or presence often comes in through the gesture of a body, or the kind of implication of a body, or the way that a body impacts a space, the way that it kind of suggests that it has been there, rather than, okay, here's a person looking into a camera. Which isn't to say I don't love work like that, and I do love making work like that when people are willing and interested. But I do think that for me, when I look at an image like this, it's so much about the tension in her feet, and what that says about being young and waiting for somebody to come home, and this too. I think that this is a good image to talk about haunting. This is a reflection of my friend Renaud in her mother's bathroom, which, like, her mom has a lot of art from the 80s and 90s, and so for me, it's like of a time. It's this kind of like postmodern, gradient background, ikebana, confusing reflection art, but then you see that there's a person in the room and you're unsure of how the planes of space work. So you see her, but you're not looking at her, the person, you're looking at her, the presence. That's just a still from a previous video, but yeah, so I think this is an installation that I did at the Contemporary Art Museum in St. Louis that was specifically looking at my mother's side of the family, who are Lebanese immigrants who came to the US in the 50s, and kind of trying to piece together that family history through the photo books that my grandmother kept, and looking at people that I'd never met, and kind of looking at my own DNA. So presence really operates in different ways depending on the work, but the backbone of it is always the joy of making photographs.
I was thinking about, like, seeing these images that you're, like, there's these ways that you're layering these archives. There's like a kind of calling in. There are different ways they work for me when I'm, like, seeing your work. There's like a way you're calling in little universes, bringing them together into these constellations, but they're also kind of rebellious gestures. I was just thinking about, also back to the film, it was hard for me to start the conversation because I was just caught in this feeling of really connecting to that joy that the ghost had, dancing in the water and the sea. And I was just thinking about these spaces of, calling in this, like, reconnection to things that you don't have access to anymore. Yeah. And just how powerful that is, actually, like, thinking about the different ways that you presented sea and nature in your work in general. I mean, we have this constant layers of landscape I'm always seeing in your work, but there's always, like, a distance to them as well. I thought maybe we can talk a little bit about the sea and water. Going back to that rhythm thing, something we were talking about earlier is, I was just sharing some stories of some research I'm doing around music practices in the Gulf in general. And my grandma is a lamenter, and there's kind of formations in these ways that music is played, which are also completely related, like the same place that traditional music is played in, performed in the Gulf, is often in the same space and the room that exorcisms are played. And so today when you were showing me that image of that rhythm of calling in the, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to call in a jinn. Don't want any French jinns. Scared. But yeah, I wanted to share this video. It's actually from Kuwait. It's a legendary singer called Audat al-Mihna. Auda is, I think a lot of the times when you hear music from the Gulf, it's usually pearl divers, it's usually male that you will hear. Like there's lots of ways artists have actually summoned this music. It's very beautiful. But actually traditionally the way I encounter it is often female. And it's very much the formation of this space. I just wanted to show a little bit of a clip of this. So I'll just show a bit like how it goes. So there's like this, always this leader. So Auda is like the leader, and you can see the formation with the clapping. And this is usually seen as like music. And so this song is actually Tob Tobi Bahar, which is it's actually a song, a spell to calm the sea, so that people come home safely. But the exact same spaces, these exact same spaces, dars they're called, where this music would be performed, would be where you would perform zars. But there are also secret meeting spaces because during British mandate, you were not allowed to gather at night, actually, just like, you know, loads of colonized places. And so dars were banned because often these ceremonies were performed at night, often the music was performed at night. So what you see, architectures across the Gulf actually of these dars, they're actually underground, and there's a very small. But I just wanted to share a bit about music as a way to clumsily talk about music and your relationship to music, music making in your work. And you're a musician.
Yeah. But first I want to say this is so funny because I'd never seen Audat al-Mihna's work, but which is again why it's so important that these things are kind of dredged up and shared. But I was asking my dad last week. He's kind of my primary source for a lot of information.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, he demands like commission. But I was asking him, I was like, Baba, you know, we have all of these. We have a few singing groups that are basically fishermen, and they have their songs from like, you know, the call and response from the boats when the pearl divers and fishermen would go out, and it's like songs to kind of keep your spirits up and or calm the sea. But I was asking him, I was like, Baba, what are the women's songs? And we actually don't, as far as I know, we don't have many or any. I've never heard one. And so a lot of the kind of vocal traditions, it's either children's folk songs or it's men's kind of working songs. And I could absolutely be wrong, but the fact that I don't know, having grown up there, means that there is this kind of overshadowing of that specific part of our history, which I think in some ways is deliberate, because I think there have been a lot of shifts in the way that gender is perceived in the Gulf since the 70s, you know, and that's a longer conversation about Wahhabism, but
yeah, but I think that the thing about these spaces of women, and like, I mean, because my grandma was a singer, like I would go 3 times a week to these sessions, and so for me, music in the Gulf and the rhythm was super entwined with getting exercised and watching others have it. But also, you know, she was a lamenter. That was like her primary role, because I grew up in a Shia in community in Manama. But there are 3 types of exorcisms, like with music in Bahrain, actually. One's really related to Persian, one's Arab Shia, which is our culture, and then one practiced in Maharag mostly, which is an island, which is more like a Sunni, like Bahri one. But all of them, I think the thing that's, the women's songs are more subversive. They're more about exactly these cultures that are being erased that you're talking about. This, you know, at GCC we did this whole work on like, and you've got some work, some video as well of like, there's actually like black magic police in the Gulf. So they kind of like, their task is like, oh, they find this like bewitched melon. And there's like a whole task force. It's like a bomb, like detonation group, like that do it. But I think that's why these histories of music, they're not recorded. And there's an artist and curator in Sardinia called Tara Dereither, and she has a project called Sota Sura, and she's beginning to archive female songs. But
I wanted to just pull this image up of the bewitched melon that GCC made a huge statue of in the 2017 Whitney Biennial.
I think we were trying to make the ugliest artwork to see how much money the Whitney would pay to make the ugliest. It's actually a talisman against Trump. It was during 2016 Whitney Biennial, and this is actually a story of an Emirati. I can't remember which emirate it was.
I want to say it was like Sharjah or
I think it's actually Sharjah. But yeah, it's amazing videos of them finding this melon, and so we did a reproduction of that melon because at the time there were loads of this talasim, talismans and spells all over the internet against Trump. It was like whole campaign that was being fought in
witchcraft.
In the Arab witchcraft universe, which was like trying to gather energy against Trump to be voted. Obviously, it didn't work. We tried to amplify.
We tried.
That was there for 6 months on the whatever that street is where the Whitney is, but. But I was just thinking about that now and like what kind of witchcraft we need to be summoning right now against colonizers.
Yeah, you're gonna need a whole coven.
We need a lot of multiple covens and music.
Yes. Okay. Maybe we should end. Maybe we should end with this and then open it up to questions. But So. Two things I wanted to share. If anyone's interested in the history of Zar, this is an amazing film by an Iranian filmmaker that is on YouTube. It's called Zar. This is like the film that I wanted to make, but couldn't. And then the last thing that I wanted to share about music. So I write all the music for my movies, except Welcome Marhaba to Life in the Emirates was not me, but I write it partially because I have no budget to hire a professional to do it, but also because it really informs my editing and my mood setting. So to end, I wanted to share a piece that I actually filmed in 2017 about a woman who uses so much skin whitening cream that she disappears. That I like, it wasn't right, but I was invited to be in this show called Going Dark, the contemporary figure at the edge of visibility at the Guggenheim in New York, and they asked to include this piece, so I re-edited it to a song that I had written. And for me, this is a really good example of how filmmaking and music truly do go hand in hand, because I don't think that I could have really understood this film as a whole piece on its own without having the music. So I recorded this music on a residency in Italy, just like on an old crappy piano, and then this was filmed in my studio in the US.